Hey everybody, Ridgid has finally joined the ranks and came out with a 6.5-inch track saw. We recently got our hands on this and put it through some tests here in the shop. I've always said that Ridgid is the hidden gem in the tool industry, meaning that they are constantly coming out with new tools and keeping up with the trades, as well as some of their tools are really rise to level. They punch outside their weight class and they're pro-worthy. Often thought of as a DIY or maybe a semi-pro brand made strictly for Home Depot, they're constantly surprising us in our tool tests by producing some robust quality tools, high-performing, powerful tools. So many times, I think their tools rival pro brand tools. So I just want you to kind of think about that a little bit. If you'd like to learn more about specifics and specs on this saw, go to the Toolbox Buzz website. I always have more information in the article. Let's talk about my first impression, because I was what impressed me was that Ridgid did this with one battery, 18-volt platform, and they put the battery in a great spot. So other manufacturers, they've got awkward placed batteries, hard to reach locations. They did a nice job. One battery. It sells as a kit. It comes with two 27.5-inch guide rails with joining bars, clamp, 18-volt 6-amp battery, charger, and obviously the saw and blade. When initially looking at this saw, I immediately noticed how strong the plunge spring was. And I wondered, is that going to come back and be an issue later during testing? And it wasn't. It's just a strong plunge. I was also disappointed to see that there's an awful lot of plastic parts and components, kind of thinner plastic, not as robust as I'd like to see. Knobs, bevel slide, depth plunge mechanism, track adjustment knobs, stuff like that. I didn't like that. The Ridgid saw weighs 8.8 pounds, does not have a variable speed dial to adjust RPM. Now, according to Ridgid, the saw was specifically designed not to need a variable speed. It's been tuned in or dialed in, effectively eliminating the possibility that the user might forget to adjust the speed and ruin a cut. I don't know if I buy that. I think it's a cost issue, but I'm ambivalent about variable speeds. I typically just set and forget, leave it on, punch the gas to the floor and go. When testing the Ridgid track saw for cutting power, I definitely wanted to use hardwood that is known for its hardness and that I encounter here up in the Northeast. So when determining that, we used the Jenka scale for hardwood, which is an industry standard. And it basically, Jenka scale basically measures the force required to embed an 11mm steel ball into wood by half its diameter by pressing it in. Now, we often refer to this Jenka test to educate clients on denting and wear and tear for hardwood flooring and maybe wood decking. It's also a good indicator to know what wood's going to do to your tools, your cutting tools, your chisels and planes and saw blades. So here in the shop, I cut 3/4 Ipe mahogany maple, plywood, 1 5/8 poplar, and which are common hardwoods that we encounter here in the Northeast. And we also cut up a little bit of 3/4 purple heart that was left over from another test we did, another hardwood. Our testing showed that the Ridgid saw is definitely underpowered. It required me to push a little harder than the saw probably wanted me to keep the cut moving smoothly. It struggled in the thicker wood as well. I was also, at that time, I started thinking about it, I was curious, okay, how's this compared to, say, the new Milwaukee or the new 40-volt Makita? So I did a little bit of side-by-side testing, one saw after another, listening and feeling. The Ridgid is definitely less powerful than those saws. They're pro-grade saws. As far as precision goes, no problem. I found that the Ridgid saw was accurate right out of the box, 90 degrees and 45 degrees, perfect cuts. Additionally, the saw blade, it lines up perfectly on the track strip at both settings. It doesn't cut into the track strip or anything like that. And that's important because we've seen competitor saws do that when you bevel it at 45. The saw has a clear plastic window here in the front with some measurements allowing you to kind of gauge where that blade comes down for a plunge cut. But it doesn't have any markings on the rear of the saw body, allowing you to know where the rear of the blade is. Now, if you're like me and you're making plunge cuts, you need to know where both ends of the blade is. And that matters. So to know where the location is, you just take a Sharpie and mark the body where it comes out and you're good to go. Track compatibility. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Ridgid comes with two 27.5-inch tracks that they easily join together. They've got these two joining rods with Allen set screws. The tracks, they appear robust and good quality. Joining the tracks, super easy and accomplished by just sliding the joining rods into each other and locking down the set screws, 2 for each side. The joining rods store in the track when not in use, and we really, really liked the Allen wrench storage location. Both the joining track Allen wrench and the blade change wrench store securely and nicely at the rear of the saw. Really nicely thought out. Well done. Let's talk a little bit about the tracks though, because at first thought, I just thought it was odd that Ridgid offers 2 small tracks as a track saw kit. Offering it with a saw is nice, don't get me wrong. Getting a track when you buy a track saw is awesome. It's not an accessory purchase, but Ridgid claims they offer the 2 smaller tracks because users prefer the portability and transportation. They stated, this is Ridgid, stated that many users like the smaller tracks for smaller cuts like small closet doors and shelving and stuff like that. I'd like to know who they talked to because I don't agree with that and feel the decision was probably being driven by merchandise and packaging departments for the Home Depot shelves and displays for space-saving concerns. Get it all in one small box. Don't get me wrong, offering a track with a track saw is a win, and Ridgid does this. I'd prefer to see a 55-inch track and then maybe the 27.5 as an accessory. And I also recognize that many of you pros out there will cut down damaged tracks and stuff to make custom size things if you're doing specialty work. That's different. Most pros and serious enthusiasts want a 55-inch track and a 9-foot track for breaking down sheet goods. The unicorn solution here would have been offer it with a 55-inch track and then let us buy another 55-inch track so that we can do both, cut the plywood both ways. Ridgid does offer a couple longer tracks, a 55-inch and a 60-inch track as well. We tested the Ridgid saw on the Milwaukee, Makita, and Festool tracks. It will not fit, doesn't work. According to Ridgid, the reasoning behind this was that Ridgid found that other brand saws that fit on the Festool tracks, by the way, the inventor of the track saw, are not a perfect fit, which can lead to very rough cuts. The Ridgid saw has its own track, so users will never have to have that experience. That's what Ridgid says. I'm calling Ridgid out on this. I'm calling BS. The Toolbox Buzz team has tested every cordless track saw to date, and we have not found that as a true statement. In fact, we use Makita and Milwaukee track saws on our job sites with incredible precise accuracy on Festool tracks. All right, let's talk about the track a little bit more. The Ridgid track, like other tracks, has a non-slip grip strip that works great and is also compatible with other track clamps. The Ridgid does come with a clamp, which is kind of a basic no-frills design. We found with most applications we didn't even use the clamp, we just hold it down. 2 nice safety features on the track saw are its riving knife and anti-tip knob or lever, which keeps the saw on the track when set at a bevel. Blade compatibility. For some reason, Ridgid chose to go against the other manufacturers who all use 20mm blade arbors. Instead, they went with a 5-inch Arbor cutting blades because they said it was more accessible to source. And I agree with that. The saw blade has a 1.6mm kerf. It's going to allow you to cut a little bit deeper than in 2x material, as opposed to, say, Festool, which is closer to a 6.25-inch blade. Rail tension bars. So 2 rail tension knobs keep the saw snug on the track, right? So the rail tension track system, cam or slot adjustment, worked perfectly to adjust the saw on the track. In fact, we set the knobs to its loosest setting, indicating it was just a perfectly snug fit right out of the box. It was really good fitment. On the bottom of the saw's shoe plate, there's a set of replaceable rail tension bars with screws. These bars can significantly wear over time to a point where they probably would need to be adjusted more, or maybe they wear out because you got to keep that snugness on the track. But it appears that Ridgid made them serviceable and replaceable, which in my opinion was smart. It eliminates a point of failure. Dust collection. So we took several videos cutting different materials. I like that the dust port rotates. It's positive clicking. We compared the videos, we evaluated the dust left on the table and the floor after making the cuts, and pretty much determined that dust collection with the vacuum is good. It's not great compared to other saws we've tested. We like the dust port size that they went with. They went with a 1.25 inch inside and 1 7/8 outside diameter. And my Rockler, Dust Right, Festool hoses, they all fit nicely onto the saw, which is great. The saw does have an electric brake safety feature on it. It stops it pretty fast, not as fast as some others. Fast. I've seen a few of them, they'll go around and around, but not this one. This one stops pretty good. We talked about that riving knife. Great safety feature, spring-loaded riving knife. It's designed basically, to keep that gap between the board and the cutoff board, which is going to keep an open kerf and from the wood from pinching the blade, and that can sometimes initiate a kickback if it gets pinched. So that riving knife is going to prevent that for you folks. I think it's been pretty well designed, and it's a nice feature to have on a track saw. Changing the blade was kind of cool. The Ridgid saw has a lock-off button that locks the saw once you lower it into a plunge position. Definitely want to make sure you have the battery moved when you're going to do this, but you got to kind of press it, lower it, and once that lock-off is engaged, the blade's arbor nut is pretty much exposed right through the window there. And then you use your onboard Allen wrench, which is smartly located and very tightly, securely set on the rear of the body to change the blade. Let's talk a little bit about the pivot and plunge mechanism. So Ridgid spent some time on the pivot and plunge spring mechanism. Clearly, it's a really robust spring. They obviously heard feedback from other brands or other users about other brand saws, like DeWalt's plunge mechanism, which is awkward. The Ridgid plunge spring is robust and the movement is smooth. They really hit it out of the park with that. The trigger safety release button is right on where your thumb would be when you're gripping. It's ambidextrous, it's easy to activate, super sweet. Depth of cut, the scale and bevel cuts. So we looked at that, and the depth of cut when set at 90 is going to be 2 1/8 inch and 2 1/4 off the track. When set at 45, you can get a depth of cut at 1 1/2 inches, and it'll go up to 1 5/8 off the track. The depth of cut is controlled by kind of an intuitive, easy to operate slider activated by a large thumb button. Again, kind of chintzy plastic. There's no fine adjustment depth screw, which was disappointing, but like I said, it's basic. The saw can bevel from -1 to 47 degrees, and it's controlled by 2 thumb knobs, front and back, like most track saws. And to achieve that -1, or the bevel more than 45 degrees, 46 or 47 degrees, there's a bevel override. You just slide that button and it'll allow you to do that, to get those extreme bevel cuts. The bevel slider does stop at 22.5 bevel angle, but there's no button to choose or ignore the detent stop. We found the setting on the bevel of this saw was like most other saws. Intuitive, fast, easy to operate. Not a lot of thought process there. So there are 2 rows of measurements on the cut scale, I should mention. The white markings for on the track, the orange markings off the track. And that's useful. So they're kind of not super easy to read, but I don't usually use those anyway. The shoe plate on the saw does not have any indents or markings on the front of it to indicate either 90 or 45 if you were going to use the saw off the track. I don't typically do this, but I mean, I could see where it might be useful. It would have been nice to have some markings there in the front. Let me see, there is no scoring feature on this saw, so that's another thing that you should be aware of. Battery attachment. So I think they did a great job with their battery location. It's well placed, easily accessed. It doesn't interfere with the tool or the track or anything like that. It's easy to use. Moving on to the fit and finish, overall fit and finish. I didn't have to use this track saw long to get that first impression feeling on build quality, fit and finish of the saw. If I had to, sum it up in one word, I would use the word basic. It's a basic track saw. When you look at what Ridgid did, they're selling you a track saw at $399 in a kit that gives everything, gets you started right away. 6 amp hour battery, charger, 2 tracks, 6.5 blade, wrenches, riving knife, connecting bars, and a clamp, right? So no matter which way you look at it, Ridgid gets you into a track saw for at least $200 less than pro-grade competitors. They do not offer a storage box for this yet, as some competitors do. They do have an interesting warranty though, and I don't talk enough about warranties on tools, and some of you guys call me out on that sometimes, but they're offering a lifetime warranty on the track saw with free parts and service. I'm not really sure what that means. Obviously there's fine print to read, but overall it's a real nice warranty, and they usually don't balk when you bring it back if you got a problem. Overall impression, It's underpowered compared to the Pro saws that I'm using. If you let this saw cut at its speed that it wants to cut at, I find it'll give you consistent, repeatable, accurate cuts. The saw is basic in its features and not as robustly designed, built as I'd prefer, but it's extremely well-priced saw for someone who's either new to the trades and just starting out and you're budget conscious, you're already on the Ridgid platform, or maybe you're a woodworker or a serious enthusiast, or even just it's a fantastic saw for someone who just wants a track saw in the house for doing projects. It's going to give you accurate, repeatable cuts, and that's really what we want from a track saw. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please take a moment, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, and of course subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our content when we publish it. I'm Rob Robillard, and we'll see you at the next tool review. Take care.